Hello everyone. Hi, my name is Kshitij Deshmukh. I'm a filmmaker and a rated chess player. My rating 1530. Yeah. So the point of this video is to look the games of great players in candidate tournaments through eyes of average rated chess player like me. So yeah, let's see how this goes. Today we are going to review the game of Pragg and Anish Giri straight from the round 1 of candidates happening in Cyprus. Pragg definitely surprised everybody with playing the most interesting opening out there called Sicilian Grand Prix. So the game started with e4, c5, knight c3, d6, f4, g6, knight f3. So when I used to play, I always, tried to find a solution against Sicilian. Now, this opening felt really nice to me, probably because it's attractive. There's an f4 pawn. So, yeah, I tried to give it a shot. I learned a couple of variations. I understood that it's, very interesting. White plays knight to f3 here. Black plays bishop to g7. Bishop to b5 by Pragg, bishop d7, a4. Alright, now very interesting move a4. I'm trying to see that I don't know if I could have played this move. Pushing the corner pawn 2 squares up in the middle of a game by, sixth move is a4. There's already a support of knight. Okay, the knight is under attack here. So, but the bishop can exchange, white bishop can capture the d7 bishop, and then you can, since it's a check, knight has to capture the bishop, and then you can take this bishop. Pragg played a4, and now knight to c6, short castle, pawn to a6, bishop to c4, pawn to e6. I always used to think pawn to e6 is a a move that weakens black structure, because f6 is a hole right now, and some ideas with knight to g5 trying to attack the f7 pawn. You can bring your queen to f3, pawn d3 is also there, but yeah, black played e6, pawn to d3, knight to e7. Okay, interesting. Instead of playing knight f6, black chose to play knight to e7. I think black's plan could be to push pawn to f5. Maybe pawn f5 can be the plan. Knight e7 is there. White plays pawn to f5. Very interesting. Now white is ready to give up the pawn on f5, but in the exchange of that, white is trying to open the lines for c1 bishop out there. So c1 bishop is out, most probably attacking the g5 square, and there are beautiful squares like f4, e3 as well. Pawn to f5 played by Pragg, e takes f5, queen to e1. Not hurrying to capture the pawn, but playing queen to e1. Again, a very important move in Sicilian Grand Prix. I think Pragg is trying to play queen to h4. There must be a move like bishop f4 or bishop g5 somewhere. But yes, okay. Bishop to e6. Pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Bishop takes bishop. Pawn takes bishop, queen takes pawn. Oh, nice. So now black has 6 pawns, white has 6 pawns, so white has recovered the pawn and is same colored bishop. Okay, but in exchange, Anish's king is still in the center and he can't castle now. I mean, as of now. Black plays queen to d7, queen to c4, not exchanging the queens, and long castle. So the game is now opposite side castles, and I think it's quite interesting because white lacks the white square bishop, while the g1 a7 diagonal is still quite open for black to attack. So bishop can always jump in and try and create threats. Also, black's both rooks can get aligned in the g and h file and try to attack the white's king. Meanwhile, for white, the opportunities are Definitely there is a rook on a1, the pawn on a4, bishop can jump to e3, the f1 rook can come to b1, and both rooks can try to create an attack on a and b files. After long castle, white played bishop to g5, trying to pin the knight on e7, and immediately black solved the pin, playing rook to e8. White played rook to e8, rook to e1. White played rook to e1, trying to again attack the knight on e7. Black immediately moved the knight to g6. Now the rooks are in front of each other. Knight to d5. Of course, the obvious threat is knight b6. There is a fork. And king moves to b8. Alright, so as white, if I was white, how would I proceed from here? So most probably I would try to pile up on the e file. I would try to play in the center. I would try to bring my, somehow I'll try to activate my f rook. Most probably I'll put the rook to e2 and then bring the f rook to e1, something like that, and try and exchange the pieces down the e file. I think that could be a interesting plan for white, because there is already a bishop on g5, knight on d5, so we are eyeing the e7 square pretty closely, and the knight on f3 is right now not in the action but ready to jump with pawn to d4 or c3 d4, something like that. c3 d4 can be a interesting break. Oh, white plays knight to f6. Very interesting. Forcing black to lose the dark squared bishop. Otherwise it's a fork and black would be exchanged down. So bishop takes knight, bishop takes bishop. Of course the rook has to move, rook f8, and bishop comes back to c3. Pawn to f4. Okay, what is the plan here? I think black is trying to push the pawn to d5, but the c5 pawn is weak, so they can't do that. Yeah, of course the e3 square is now controlled by black, and black can try and pile up on e file now. Queen also has its way clear now. Queen can come to g4, queen can come to f5. Rooks are exchanged. Okay, so white takes down the black rook, rook takes rook, rook to e1 offering the exchange. Exchange declined. Black plays the rook to f8, queen to e6. Now white is offering a queen trade. Black accepts. Queen takes queen, rook takes queen. Now the d6 pawn is in danger. One way to protect is by playing king to c7. And yes, of course, black plays king c7. Knight to g5, attacking the h7 pawn. I think you can't push the pawn because knight, of course, you lose the support to the knight. And how do you support the pawn? I don't think you can support the pawn because rook h8 can't be played. If you play rook h8, then the bishop hiding on c3 will just capture you. Can't move the knight to support this pawn. So pretty much gone, yeah? So what can black do? Can black attack something? Almost nothing. So black plays king to d7, attacking the rook instead. Interesting. So rook moves back to e4, and now I think, is there any possibility to save? Yes, there is. Now you can just push the pawn. Oh, instead of pushing the pawn, black plays the rook to f5. So white plays knight h7 anyway, pawn to d5, attacking the rook. Rook moves back to e2, pawn to d4. Now bishop is attacked. Bishop is pretty much out of the game so far, so bishop might try and reroute through e1. Let's see what white plays. And white goes bishop e1, knight to e5, rook e4. Seems pretty solid for white, yet I am not able to figure out the use of bishop on e1 as of now. Also the knight on h7 is kind of trapped, can't move anywhere. The moment black tries to attack the knight, it can escape. And in this, black plays knight to g4, securing the square on e3. Of course, a very solid square supported by 2 pawns on d4 and f4. Pawn to h3, knight moved to e3, pawn c3, pawn, oh, black didn't exchange the pawns, black went back, knight to d5, pawn to h4, progressing the pawn, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, rook to h5. Now attacks the knight, knight to g5, knight to f6. I think the better move was to play pawn to b5 here. Very interesting. Trying to, exchange the pawn and create a passer from b5. But black played knight to f6, and this seems to be a mistake from black. White plays rook to e6, attacking the f6 knight, and g6 knight is also in danger. So black has to give up the rook by playing rook takes knight. White actually captured the knight, and now rook g4. Okay, attacking the pawn 2 times. Pawn gets pushed, pawn to h5, attacks the knight. Knight to e5. Now you are attacking the d3 pawn. But white doesn't care. White pushes the pawn to h6, and there is a clear path for white to make a queen now. Black tries its best by playing knight f6 check. There is a pin, so pawn cannot capture. King has to move. King moves to f1. Okay. Knight takes bishop, king takes knight. Now rook takes pawn. Yeah, rook takes pawn. Rook takes f4. Now we are left with 4 pawns for white, and there is a one strong passer on h6, while black has a6, b7 and c5. All 3 pawns are stuck. Black plays rook to h2, putting the rook behind the running pawn. Of course, rook f6 comes to the rescue. Rook h3 trying to eye the d3 pawn. King d2 supporting the d3 pawn. Rook h2 check. King e3. Rook h3 check. King e4. Pawn to c4 trying to create ruckus, but white gladly accepts it, playing d takes c4, rook takes c3, and moving the king to where it actually matters, king to f5. Now black king moves to e7, rook to b6 trying to attack the b7 pawn, and it's a goner, the pawn can't be saved, so rook takes the c5 pawn, and white pushes the pawn to h7. Now the thing is that Anish resigned here, because even if you put the rook behind the pawn like this, you can simply capture this pawn, rook takes b7 check, king has to move. Wherever the king moves, what you can do is now you can play king to g6, trying to support the pawn. So the black rook can't give a check here, because if it gives a check, then white can simply move the king to f6, again a check, then king can move to g5. Now there is no check, rook has to move, and once the rook moves anywhere, like for example to f2, then checkmate. All in all, Pragnanda is in lead. Let's see what happens next in the second round, and don't forget to subscribe this channel. I'm trying to analyze, and I'm trying to ask questions from a mid 1500s point of view. So yeah, see you soon.